December, I stood on the east side of the Fox River and watched as the encampment known as Tent City burned. The river was iced over, the wind was so strong I had to fight to stand up. I had recently accepted the role as the new executive director of PADS of Elgin. While I was under no delusions that PADS was in a position to solve all the problems of every person experiencing homelessness, I knew our organization had a vital role to play in serving folks who find themselves without safe shelter. As smoke rose into the winter sky and first responders moved into action, I couldn't ignore the truth in front of me. The gap between where we are and where we want to be as a community is too wide. That fire, and the ones that followed, were a stark reminder of how many in our community remain without safe, sustainable housing. They were a reminder of how fragile life can be, how quickly someone's shelter, their last sense of security, can be taken away. They were a reminder of the urgency of this work and of the distance we still have to go to make our community one in which so many more of us have more of what we need. And yet, in the days that followed, I saw something else too, something just as powerful. The outpouring of blankets, coats, and supplies from this community was overwhelming. People saw suffering, and they wanted to help. They wanted to make things right. That's who we are. That's the kind of community we live in. But generosity in a moment of crisis, while vital, is not enough. Compassion is not just a feeling. It must become action. And it is best done as a long-term, sustained action toward a goal. Like so many of you, I believe that every single person is inherently worthy of dignity and respect, that every person is doing their best, not just to survive, but to thrive. And that when the conditions are stacked against someone, when housing is out of reach, when medical bills pile up, when the safety net has holes, then it is our shared responsibility to do something about it. This community shows up for each other, not just for one day or in a single outpouring of blankets. So many of us do this work every day. We create systems that stand ready to provide care for every one of us who needs it. That is what PADS exists to do. PADS of Elgin began in the 1990s as a grassroots effort by faith leaders to provide a warm place to sleep on cold nights. Over the years, it has become a place not only where people stay for one night at a time, but a place where people make their home and find the empowerment they need to connect with the safe, stable, sustainable housing situations that are right for each of them. Today, PADS is not only a shelter, it is a bridge, and bridges exist to close gaps. PADS is a bridge from instability to stability, a bridge from homelessness to home. Last year alone, PADS provided 16,425 nights of shelter. We served over 49,000 meals to folks in shelter and over 1,000 to our outreach guests. 88 guests were placed in permanent housing, and shelter care was provided to 144 guests, including 40 children. But these numbers aren't just statistics. They represent people. They represent people like Henry, the former school teacher, who had never imagined he'd experience homelessness. When his rent spiked beyond what he could afford, he found himself living in his car, driving Uber at night, exhausted and trying to hold on to hope. Through King County's rapid rehousing program and PADS support, he found a stable home. And as he picked up his keys to his new apartment, he thanked PADS' welcoming staff and shared, "What I found at PADS was the stability I desperately needed. Safe housing, warm meals, and the time to think clearly about my next steps without the constant stress of wondering where I'd sleep or find my next meal." This work is about people like Thomas, who found himself living alone, grappling with the loss of his wife during the COVID-19 pandemic. Working at a hotel as a janitor, he earned just enough to scrape by. Untreated diabetes had rendered him legally blind, and though he initially managed, soon he was unable to perform even the most basic tasks. When he lost his job and found himself without savings, Thomas stayed with relatives until the situation became untenable and landed him on the steps of the Elgin Police Department in desperate need of help. Our Elgin police officers are often the first responders to those experiencing homelessness. And in this case, they became a lifeline for Thomas, connecting him with our organization's program and advocating for him throughout the intake process. At PADS, Thomas' health began to stabilize for the first time in years, and as it became clear that he needed more comprehensive care than the shelter could provide, case managers and a visiting nurse found a spot for Thomas in an assisted living facility. Now settled into his new home, he reflects fondly on his time at our shelter and how much he misses the staff who treated him like family. This work is about people like Shaw Thompson, a proud member of our PADS board and an advocate for the rights of people experiencing homelessness on both the state and national stage. If you know Crystal, or you attended our gala last year and heard her story, you know that a health crisis precipitated a financial crisis that led Crystal to a stay as a PADS client, and eventually to a mission to make sure that anyone in need of shelter gets not only the basic care, but also the dignity and respect we all deserve. The name PADS is not just an acronym, it is a promise. Public action to deliver shelter. And you, every person hearing this message, are the public. Your action makes this possible. Your generosity bridges the gap between instability and stability. Every one of us is trying to thrive, but for too many, the obstacles are overwhelming. PADS exists to remove those barriers, not just by providing shelter, but by restoring stability and dignity to people's lives. The name Public Action to Deliver Shelter is not just a description of what we do. It is a call to action to you, the public. You show up, you volunteer, you give, you advocate. You believe in a world where more people have more of what they need. You bridge the gap between where we are and where we want to be. You put out the fires that harm and light the fires that heal. Because of you, people find stability, safety, and warm shelter. Because of you, people who have lost hope find it again. And together, we will keep building a community where everyone has a place to call home. PADS far from does this work alone. Bridging those gaps of homelessness and housing insecurity takes community partners like the Association for Individual Development, the Community Crisis Center, Centro de Información, Food for Greater Elgin, One Collective's Winter Shelter, the City of Elgin, the Elgin Police Department, Elgin Cooperative Ministries, so many individual and connected faith communities throughout the region, and more, join together to share our collective organizational power to close this gap too. If you know me personally, through my work as a pastor or through my writing, then you already know that one of my deepest commitments is to building community rooted in belonging, mutual care, and joy. It is my profound privilege to lead the organization that calls itself Public Action to Deliver Shelter, and to continue this work alongside an incredible staff and so many others who show up every day to build the kind of community we want and deserve. Together, we respond to the fires that harm. Together, we light the fires that heal. Together, we bridge the gap.